I did a degree in electronic engineering and computer science in the era when a computer the size of a small fridge had 64K of memory. The first computer game, the first text-adventure computer game, turned up on our new mainframe at the university. Rather a lot of us spent rather a lot of time playing that rather than actually getting around to doing our degree work. I then joined the BBC as a maintenance engineer in radio, and shortly after escaped to local radio, starting off at Radio Bristol on attachment, and then a travelling engineer on the network around the place. Ending up back in Bristol in the 1990s. And what happened, and it's sort of the circumstances playing through, was that they wanted to build a new media centre, just as I'd taken over as the sort of chief engineer for the area. And they wanted to put in digital technology. This is about 94, 95. So when we were discussing people wanted to go digital, now because it's the new thing, it's always the new thing, always. Anyway, we were the first people to put in computer-based playout and service-based storage in the BBC at Radio Bristol. Now, out of this came an idea, which we now call object-based media. We're not exactly sure who came up with this version of the name. I can certainly find 15 years ago somebody referring it to Mike's object-oriented radio idea. But basically this was about 95, and Dalit was the software we installed, and in that you could create a running order for your program. So a list of items to play out, and so you'd have the piece of news content, piece of magazine content, the music and things like that. Now, there was a presenter called Rob Salvage who had been working as a senior person at Radio Gloucester, come back to Bristol, was the afternoon presenter. He got no backup, he got bored. He got these computers now he wanted to play, and he took his portable tape recorder out in the mornings and would go to some event and go and talk to people rather than sitting in the studio on his own. And he would record interviews and links out with people at an event, come back, chop them up, put them into the computer, interleave them with the music, and he wouldn't actually introduce the piece of music. He'd say, "Oh, we'll talk to so-and-so after this," and then pick up after the record. So we chop these pieces up, put them into the running order, interleaving them with the music, which was already being selected by computer at that stage. And then you could join them up, press link, and you could specify that because when you put a piece of music in the computer, you'd say, well, the vocals start at this point. So quite automatically, you could tell it to overlap the speech segment so that you talked up to the vocals starting, just like a sort of DJ technique, standard DJ technique. So we put the program together with the links, press link, press play at the end of the news, and you'd find him in the middle of his program whilst he was presenting in the newsroom, setting up the interviews for the next day. And there'd be this sort of, "Rob, what are you doing here? Hang on a minute." Then you go and listen to his program and realise that actually what you could do, he got this running order, but you could swap all the music out for a completely different set of records. And it wouldn't matter, it'd still be a valid program. And I had a conversation with one of the news editors who wanted to regionalise her news bulletins. So we had different bulletin for Bath, Bristol and Somerset. I said, well, you could pre-record all the links, get the journalist to pre-record all the links, and then you could have different running orders for the 3 different stations, for the 3 different news bulletins. And then Norman Rickard, the newsreader, could read them all out at the same time via the computer. At which point I was roundly told off, "The news is live!" And that was the end of that idea. But having seen this and the possibility that we could take all these assets and deliver them to the audience, and they could select the ones they want, or we could help them select the ones they want. Is what I turned up at BBC R&D with in 1990. And it's taken me about 20 years to persuade everybody else to put some effort into this, but finally we got a breakthrough. So object-based media is what we've ended up calling it. Object, a thing. It could be anything from a short music sting or even a piece of text through to actually an entire program. Doesn't really matter. It's about manipulating elements. And once you've got a series of elements, it can be responsive or interactive. So it can respond to data as per an app that's navigating, or you can actually directly respond to it. And the possibilities of it are quite strong. So the contrast between linear media production, where you take the set of elements, you render them to a single finished form, in the case of radio, a stereo file, you package them up and send them. Send them a radio program, you send it via a transmitter or via an IP link. And then the one form of that media is represented on whatever device you've got. Not necessarily very well in the case of a 14:9 video displayed on a phone that way up. So, the advantages we can see immediately with being object-based is that you take the elements, you package them together with instructions. This is why we tend to call this the Ikea diagram. You send the collection of objects and the data, and then you can reassemble them in different ways for different devices or different circumstances. So, initially, we've been playing with these ideas for quite a long time. We started off about 5 or 6 years ago with this one, which you can probably still find online. It's a radio program called the Cornish Gardener from Radio 4. And the producer of it was quite interested in working with us to do something different with it. And we settled on making it variable in length. One of the things the producer says is, I produce a 28-minute program for Radio 4, and suddenly they'll come back to me 6 months later when I've forgotten all about it and want a 24-minute edit of it, and then somebody else will want a sort of 5-minute piece to go in somewhere else. So it seemed to fit with, it'd be useful in production, it'd be useful in perhaps for your bus ride. Your bus ride's 20 minutes, but you've got a half an hour program. How about we can make a program that is the length you need? And the key thing for me is that involved understanding the story structure, the narrative structure in a radio program, and being able to manipulate it so that regardless of which version of it you got, it was still coherent as a narrative piece. Turns out, a radio documentary, this particular documentary maker makes 3-act plays as documentaries. I did an analysis of it and you could see, end of scene 1, end of scene 2, end of scene 3. End of act 1, and their ashes were scattered in the gardens. And you see this sort of dramatic pause before going into the analysis in act 2. The dramatic moment, and he was revealed to be a spy in the Sunday newspapers and what have you. The whole structure there, we learnt awful lot about manipulating it, and it took about a year to make. Not repeatable. Another attempt, this one was called Cake Cook Along Kitchen Experience. So take a cookery program about teaching you how to cook. Well, actually most cookery programs are very passive. Most of the people who consume cookery programs cook less as a result, not more. So an interactive experience whereby it stopped and waited for you as you prepared the meal yourself. And if you were slow on one thing, it would reschedule the next set of instructions, the next piece of video you were fed, the next item, until you got to the completed work. Again, very manual. We developed some back-end server things with that we've reused, but I think that one took about 18 months in all, from conception to final production. Not really very sustainable. You're not going to put one of those out a week if it takes you a year to build it. It's a bit like the games industry. The last one's Henry Cook and Co.'s piece on the inspection chamber, designed for voice. So your Alexa or something like that, for which he developed a tool kit, not dissimilar to the one that I'm about to show you, but a one-off tool, one-off experience. Again, we learnt a lot from the audit, from the user testing and the audits. There's more user testing done on this one. It was a drama in which you played the alien being inspected. So narratively quite tight, a bit like an adventure, the old adventure games. The other things we played with were forms of presentation, different layering. So this is a weather forecast where the weather presenter could be replaced by a sign language weather presenter, or removed altogether on an app or something like that. So that was a linear experience which was always the same length, but different presentation content. And likewise, the origami experience, which got us a bit closer. We were starting to develop the tools. This one, you could have multiple views, and you could navigate backwards and forwards. What's interesting when you get to something like this, is this went up online with the analytics. We could tell which fold the audience were having difficulty with. So you actually understand your audience behaviour remotely, which when we talk about opera and audiences and not having an audience or having an audience, we're suddenly beginning to see our audience respond to this material. So how do we turn something that seems to take us 6 months to a year to make, say standard in the sort of video games industry, I mean, yeah, that's 3 or 4 years, and turn it into something that you can turn out every week? Because that's what we do in broadcasting. We make stuff on a very regular basis. So we took a step back from making demos and investigating the user experience to actually building a toolkit which is drag and drop. Now, this is basically a graph representation, graph as in mathematical graph, so a series of nodes and a series of transitions between those nodes. So each of these represents a narrative piece, such as the start, and then you have a series of choices. Each of those can be represented by different pieces of media. So you could have an audio-only representation, and text-only representation, and an AV representation for that particular piece of information. And then based on either an interaction with you, so you pressing a button on the screen, or data that you have previously given to us, we can make a navigation between two different pieces of content that might be a technical explanation and a layman's explanation, or any other choice you might make, depending on your subject matter. So we released this about a year ago. It sits on our servers, so you need a BBC login to run it. But it's web-based. So we can open this up to anybody with a BBC login, and that can be non-BBC people as well, through something I'm going to show you in a bit. And we had some interest from BBC Click, the technology magazine programme. They came and visited us, took one look at it and said, oh, we've got our 1000th episode coming up soon. Can we have a play? To which we went, great, yes, please. Thankfully, they had a couple of computer experts on their production team, or former computer experts, who were able to handle the sort of logic and thinking, and they produced something enormous. It's nearly 3 hours of content in there. What they basically did was film a lot of their content for their next series in their downtime, and poured it into an interactive experience where you could choose. And the nice thing is it's a magazine programme, and the presenter quite often within Click will break the fourth wall. In fact, that's the presentation style. He's even been known to do that on the inside of the television screen trick, to sort of say, hey, pay attention to me, I'm your presenter. So you responding by pressing buttons to say, I want to do this or I want to do that, works brilliantly. Unlike Bandersnatch, where you're kind of making decisions and why, that's a very long explanation. But we felt uncomfortable with that. We felt really comfortable with this when it was launched. We got publicity on the front page of the BBC News. There's a little banner, The Future of Television. We got 500,000 people visit that within weeks. We got the idea then of interactive content within the BBC, and the idea that production teams could make this without too much engineering input on the map. In parallel with that, Instagramification took a little longer to put together. It was a commission by BBC R&D to make an interactive piece aimed at the younger audience, 18 to 25-year-olds, the audience that we are having difficulty retaining. This much smaller audience, because we didn't quite get the same level of exposure, plus it's not a recognised brand. But we're able to do some user testing with this as well. I'll come back to some of the results. But these were basically two technical demonstrators, and then BBC Creative, who make trailers, who publicise the programmes, got in touch with us and said, "Can we do something around his dark materials?" And I'll show you the result in a minute, if it works. This has been our big breakthrough, because it's our first, hey, can we use your tool to do what we need to meet? Rather than us, hey, we've got this technology, we need to try it out approach, which is never as good. On the presentation side, there have been a number of separate experiments. I just need to mention Lauren Ward's been working on being able to change the background and foreground sounds in Casualty. One's already been done, one's at the second follow-up's being released. She's getting in at the script writing stage to develop this. Two immersed projects for a year or two back, developing on-screen graphics, joint work with BT, and I've forgotten some of the other participants, but we're still yet to build on those learnings back into the toolkit. And then the Vostok-K incident, which was a multiple device audio-only experience, which our audio team have been working on. So, the feedback to click was really quite strong, but also very interesting. And some of this parallels spatial navigation issues that Joe's been talking about, which is really intriguing because we've got parallels here. So the lovely one was Mark Alford, who's somebody very important in Sky. To have one of your competitors, big digital people, being positive about it was great. Some journalists as well worked really well, really interesting. Love this functionality on BBC News. That's quite a nice one. So back to where, do I want more or less of this on news, and would some of our colleagues have been doing work on it. But you can see some of the same issues. Would have been good to see an estimate of the time left in the show, because I had limited viewing time. Just like you're beginning to get a bit stressed. Oh, will this finish by the time I need to go and do something else? Love the idea, but want it either watch a linear stream or be presented with the individual articles. I wanted to navigate it in a different way, probably in the way you used to in a web page. Or great effort, but I'd like to see it on BBC iPlayer. So I want it on a television set. Can we make it work on a television set? And this navigation one came up again and again. And somebody was telling me about signage in Tate Modern. And the people that he'd been working with, this is a psychologist, and he'd been working with the company doing the sign, is that you're two types of signs that get you there for an airport or whatever, or for a museum, get comfortably lost. Comfortably lost, as in you know where you are, or you can find out where you are, and you know you can find your way to the cafe, the exit, or what have you. And it's being able to put that sort of comfortably lost into a media experience that we think will probably help with immersion. The Instagramification, we got people in the lab and did some user studies, but also we got feedback from our taster launch. We got the highest rating, strong female skew, which is unusual for a tech demonstrator, which is nice. And of this, 69% believe that BBC should do more of this. This was the best piece of feedback we could get because it said that the people on Taste Up liked this. In the lab, again, we got the fear of missing out. Oh, I'd like to be able to know what things I've missed and see it, so the navigation problem comes back again. And also a thing about honesty. So with this, you answered a few questions up front. Well, why did you choose that for me? So being transparent about the mechanism that's presenting you with that piece of content next. Again, I think it's to do with navigation as well, but also presentation style. If the presenter's telling you, and we're going to do this because, that's much more satisfying than just you being taken on a different route, or knowing you're taken on a different route, or even worse, not knowing you're being taken on a different route, and then having great fear that you're being manipulated or in a search bubble or something like that. His Dark Materials Discover Your Demon had an extra element to it. It was social. It was delivered quite late. Lots of reasons for that. So it was about halfway through the series. They were aiming for around 20,000 interactions. That would be a good outcome. We are probably over 300,000 sessions by this stage, and over 300,000 people arriving at the front, over 200,000 people actually starting it, and probably by now about 150,000 getting to the finish of the first thing, so getting to their demon. You familiar with that? Anybody not familiar with these Dark Materials and demons? Okay. What was interesting then, because it's quite short, I'll show you, is that people then re-entered again, a few of them again. 2,000 did it more than 4 times in one session, and somebody went through it 63 times. We're not sure whether that's somebody that we know who was just testing it, or somebody who we know whose offspring were exploring it, because that's what Dad gets up to. But you can see here's the graph of the sessions, and you can see it being trailed. But the nice thing is a share on social media element to it. And so we've got this sustained usage over a period of time. And that's kind of like nice engagement. So let's see if I can find the mouse and the technology will behave. Just make it full screen if I can. So, opening screen. This is where we get into use of cookies and the privacy policy, because we're gathering data on people. Lots of work on handling that sort of thing. I know what's happening. Hang on a minute. The sound's coming out of the projector, unfortunately. Let me just... Oh, could we...
Is that the audio cable from down there?
No, it's coming out of there. Is there a headphone jack on there? No, in which case what I'll do... Oh,
there you are.
That's triggered it. Right. So what we have here is sections of video, still images, and overlaid interactive buttons. This is all done in CSS, and there are templates for it, but dealing with different size and shape of mobile phones has proved quite challenging. The structure of this particular thing is finding out what your daemon is, and the way we had a writer, Emma Nuttall, who's doing a PhD in the future of the book, on a placement with us, and she dived in as soon as she found out about this and took what was going to be a simple personality test and turned it into a series of narrative pathways based on Dungeons and Dragons classifications, which is sort of part of her knowledge base that I was slightly surprised by but delighted to. And so each of these narrative choices reflect different characteristics in the Dungeons and Dragons classifications and get you to a number of demons. Have we got a volume control? No, we're flat out, I'm afraid. So each of these choices, and it waits for you, delivers a piece of video. It's the animation, and then you can possibly just see it stops, turns into a still image. Unfortunately, the amount of production work in this is quite high because it starts off as one choice, and then you split, and then you split, and then you split, and then you split to get to the various demons, and you have to author each pathway. That is the worst possible production issue, but in this case it was necessary because of some shortcomings in the tool, and actually because we have multiple outcomes to develop. It's not the recommended approach. So the narrative tells the story of little elements from his dark materials. And you then get an outcome, which is one of the demons to play again, but then also the share on social media. And if you're developing share on social media on mobile phones, beware, because Twitter app, when it launches a web page, will then launch into the Twitter mini browser, which does not have the same functionality as a fully blown browser, and therefore doesn't play the experience properly. So we had to manipulate that such that we know you've just shared via Facebook or Twitter, and then we give you a link that opens either Safari or Chrome or whatever, your built-in browser. Let's say this has been very successful, exceeded expectations by quite some margin, and we have a number of people within the BBC lined up wanting to, is this going to play ball? That's it. Wanting to use the tool. We're also making the tool available via our Makerbox site to any reasonable approach to use the tool for experimentation and for public service purposes. So any museums, arts institution or what have you, on reasonable terms, come and join in. So this is the sort of Makerbox philosophy behind it. We're basically taking something we've built, testing it in the real world. I mean, we've got these experiences that we make, but we only make a certain type of content. Other people come along and make things we never thought of, which help develop the tool. it's the corporate development creative economy. This is the one for the grant applications and what have you, and the collaborations, and build a community practice. Basically, build a knowledge base of people who know how to do this stuff, people who can teach other people how to do this stuff. So, interested in working with universities and such like, and stimulating a new form of media. That's the sort of Makerbox team's sort of corporate approach. So there are a number of tools. It's not just the story kit tool that's on this platform. We have a number of others as well, some of which are licensed. How are we doing for time? Nearly running out. So the definition of community practice that they use: group of people, passion for something, learn how to do it better, and they regularly interact. So we have a forum set up to go with access to the tools. So as well as StoryKit, StoryFormer is the authoring tool within StoryKit. We've got a number of different tools, some of which are licensed from other sources, some of which are done in-house. So Caldi, I think somebody's got that wrong. They also have somebody else's slides that they used the other day. So Caldi's speech recognition tool, developed using subtitles on BBC television programmes. Works really well on scripted television content and radio. Bit disastrous for user testing. But that's available as a tool. We're using it internally, sharing again with public service purposes, Zapper and Soma, which are augmented reality tools that we've licensed. So we're looking at case studies around the use of the tools. They've got a number of ones that they've done within the Makerbox team, using different tools. So the Evo, Soma Live Capture Fun, and the Scenic tools. They're not necessarily tools that are still available, but they're case studies from those particular pieces of work. And we've got a forum, and I forget the particular name of it, but it's already set up. Discourse, that's it. A discourse forum for people using these tools to share information on it, and to basically go, help! And we're sat behind the back and we're alerted if anybody posts on it. The sorts of technologies we're interested in range from XR, all sort of XR, interactive voice. We've got development of those sorts of things. Soma is a tool, is a live event capture tool, object-based media, which is what I'm talking about, and then UGC, and there's some AI tools we're developing in the background. So, if you're interested in using any of these tools, bbc.co.uk/Makerbox, and email makerbox@bbc.co.uk, and my colleagues will pick those up and will sign you up. You'll get a questionnaire about what your organisation is and what purposes you want to use it for, because obviously there are restrictions about what you actually use these tools for. And our taster platform is available for publication for stuff that fits within what you might call our editorial rules, things that won't damage the BBC brand. Student projects, probably not, but collaborative projects with museums and other institutions probably be very welcome. So that's me.